We are officially under a month away from the NBA draft, and the question is, which player can change the Sixers franchise forever? Well, we'll add more to that conversation today, and Paul George will add more as he doubles down on his Sixers draft take. Speaking of Paul George, he also gets called out by a former Sixer max contract player, and I have a lot to say about it because it really ticked off the fan base. So we'll get into all that, and lastly, we will look at the Eastern Conference landscape moving forward. But welcome in to Philly Take with RB. I'm RB. We are continuing to drop all of our draft coverage on all platforms, so make sure you're following everywhere. Make sure those notifications are on. And we started off with Shams Charania today, a quote on the Pat McAfee show. He predicts that this offseason could be the craziest in NBA history. He says, quote, "This is the most, I think, anticipation team execs have had over an offseason. I think it could be the most craziest ever." And when I first heard this, I said, here we go again. You know, the talking head's going to try to push a lot of buzz and just create a lot of anticipation for just a regular offseason. But when I listened to this clip and the more I thought about what he said, I actually think he's right. Right now, you have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who we talked about on Friday, who are now 5 wins away from an NBA championship. And if they win it all, they're going to completely revolutionize the way that we look at team building with their young roster and with all their draft picks and things like that moving forward. And it's no longer, 3-star teams and let's go and just, persuade these guys to come to the big markets. Like, look at how these teams are building. Look at the teams that are left in the playoffs. And it's all about kind of, walking that tightrope with the max contracts and the young players and really balancing that out. Looking forward into this offseason, we're going to see a lot of teams moving pieces, the Celtics, Bucks, etc. And I think it's really going to change the landscape. So Shams is right. This could be one of the craziest offseasons ever, and it could completely change the landscape of the East, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But before we dive into that, we need to talk about what happened yesterday. Paul George drops another podcast episode, and he talks about the night of the Eagles parade where he was stuck in traffic. Remember, he couldn't even move, and everybody's like, yeah, great night to go out, Paul George, in the middle of a wave of people. And he finally opened up about what was said to him that night as he was on a podcast. He had Carmelo on. Let's hear what he had to say.
The window down. They like this. Yo, that's Paul George. Yo, that is Paul George. Said, yo, we could have kept Tobias. We could have kept Tobias. You gonna do this? Shout out to you.
So Paul George says that a fan yelled to him, man, we could have kept Tobias. This is when the Sixers were really down bad and things were bad. I remember Paul George had a pinky injury at that point, and a fan yelled, we could have kept Tobias, right? And they were joking around. And he ends up saying here, shout out to Tobias, joking manner, just having some fun. Cool, right? And honestly, I think Paul George the last couple of weeks has done a really good job taking accountability with some of these clips, saying I need to be better. We need to be better. Now, we'll see if it translates to the court because you have to go back it up. You can't just say it on your podcast. But he has been opening up about a lot, having some humor, whatever, right? So then Tobias Harris comes out and he replies on Twitter. And there's been a handful of times this past year where Tobias has trolled the Sixer fan base. But this one really ticked me off, right? After the parade, 4 for 27. And here's Tobias smoking a cigar. And Tobias Harris felt that it was right and it was funny to troll the Sixers fan base. Now, look, credit to Tobias. I said that before, right? He found a niche role here with the Detroit Pistons, made the most money on the team this year. The guy is probably worth now, $250, $300 million in his career. And he's living large. He knows he'll probably never win a championship, but he's having fun. He's rich. He's living. So I don't understand why Tobias Harris continues to troll the Sixer fan base. And of course, they were joking, whatever, but for Tobias to come back and act like, oh, well, you guys kept the wrong person. You guys went 4 and 27 after the deadline. We know it was a disastrous year. But let me tell you something, Tobias, it wasn't because of you. Matter of fact, if you hadn't been so bad in the first place, the Sixers would have never had to sign Paul George. They would have never had to go through this whole transformation if you hadn't come out and dropped 0 points in an elimination game in 29 minutes. If you had done just a little bit more to help the superstar who's playing on one leg and help Tyrese Maxey, Sixers probably beat the Knicks, the same team that knocked your ass out again this year, and you're sitting here just laughing. Like, it just goes again to show that Tobias is Tobias, you know, like he's not really worried about the prize. Like, he took time out of his day as a $300 million man to troll back to Paul George on Twitter. Like, they weren't calling you out. Paul George was just highlighting a funny moment and how the Sixers fans are holding him accountable. And you thought it was so funny to jump in. It's like the one guy that makes the comment, you know, during the joke, and then everybody sits back and like, whoa, like that comment wasn't needed, you know? So Tobias, man, I mean, especially for the fan base that, you know, at least tried to support you for a couple years, 5 years here in Philly, and you never did anything to help propel the team forward and made all this money. They gave you the opportunity to be the guy, gave you the max, and you thought it was so funny to just keep trolling the Sixers fans. He was referring to this when the Sixers had finished the season 4-28, when Daryl Morey said that they had championship aspirations after the deadline. So what do you know? Tobias, just like his entire Sixers career, missed again because it was 4-28, not 4-27. So glad he took the time to look that up. But yeah, that's where we're at. And I hope Paul George really does take this to heart. I hope he sees this comment and says, you know what? I'm not getting clowned by Tobias. I'm going to go out here, prove my worth, and figure it out and get back on the court and be healthy. And that's what he said all offseason so far. So we'll see if he holds up his end of the bargain. But speaking of Paul George, he also talked about Ace Bailey again. And with a month to go, you know, I've been open saying that I think he's the best selection for the Sixers at 3. We dropped some breakdowns. I think overall, all of these prospects in any draft have flaws. They have things you look out for. Sometimes you get the one perfect prospect who you know is going to be an all-star from the jump. But these guys are all risks, you know, and I think Ace Bailey has the traits and the measurables that can really develop and really signal a good NBA player down the line. Paul George has said the same thing. He has said before that he would take Ace at number 1. And here's what Paul George most recently said about Ace Bailey.
I want to ask this real quick because I think in this draft, Cooper and Ace Bailey are going to be
1 and 2.
Ace, Cooper, Dylan Harper. I think probably the top 3, right?
Okay.
But I think
Edgecombe in there
those
too.
two, Ace and Cooper,
is 1 and 2.
Is the one that they're going to be compared and linked to each other because of the size, the skill set. I think they're going to be compared to one another for the rest of their careers.
Yes.
I think I like Cooper Flag as well. I think he's going to be an all-star. When it's all said and done, I think he's going to go down as one of the best players our league have seen. He's got that talent and, to your point, the trajectory going that direction. But I look at Ace Bailey and how he played this season, and I think his game translates as a go-getter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Ace heavy. Like,
all-star. You know, put the ball in my hand, last seconds. I'm like, I want those moments. Like he's ISO ball ready.
Yes. So
Paul George with some high comments for Ace Bailey, high praise, kind of looks at him like a junior Paul George, and he says, look, I want the last bucket. I want it in my hands ready to go. Hey, hopefully we get that, right? It is funny how sometimes it kind of sounds like Paul George is already retired just talking about these young guys, but Paul George is heavily advocating for Ace Bailey, so at this point, it feels like all indications are pointing towards him coming to Philly. If not, that would be pretty hilarious. But I mean, he has the support. He has vets that really want to play with him. So look, to me, it sounds like Ace Bailey is probably the pick that we're leaning towards. And Carmelo's a big fan of him as well. I like the potential, and I like that there's already some camaraderie there. I'm sure PG's probably reached out to him anyway. But speaking of Ace Bailey, and let me know if you agree with Paul George down below, I was reading a few things regarding Ace Bailey, and there was a new report put out yesterday. The Sixers reportedly determined to draft a dynamic young talent amidst NBA trade rumors. They talked about the recent reports with Markkanen and Kevin Durant, guys like that. And Mark Stein puts out a dump of news every Monday, and he said this week that the Sixers are determined to add the dynamic young talent to their core and are unlikely to trade back very far if they deal the number 3 overall pick. So, you know, they're not trading back to 9, 10, 11. If anything, it would be back a spot or 2. But it seems like they are intent on adding a young piece. And I agree with what they say here, you know, that it's smart. They say later in the article that the Sixers have a lot of urgency. The injuries continue to add up. Philly's championship window with the pair probably isn't going to get any wider than it is now. That gives President Daryl Morey plenty of reasons to take a longer view with the team's first-round pick. And it says that the Sixers have a great opportunity to add a young player with cost control who more closely aligns with the timeline of guard Tyrese Maxey, as well as Grimes, as well as McCain. So I agree. Like I said, if things don't work out this year, like this is the last chance. But even if it doesn't with Joel and PG, you start looking towards 2028, 2029, when you're going to have more draft assets and you can have all of these younger guys on the same timeline. So I do agree with that. And I find this pretty interesting, but it says Rutgers fumbled its most talented roster in program history. It's not uncommon for a projected top 5 pick to never play in March Madness, but that has never happened where 2 top 3 picks go 15 and 17 on the season and miss out on the March Madness tournament entirely. That has never happened. And a lot of people have been bringing this up in conversation. I've been on the other hand saying, well, even if guys made the tournament, we have to talk about if they choked in the tournament, right? Like if they're not playing well in high leverage situations, that also has to be an argument. But I was wondering why. So I looked at the Rutgers team and their stats, and well, the answer is right smack in front of your face. Outside of Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, the third best player on the team, Lathan Somerville, averaged 8 points per game and 4 rebounds per game. This is a center, by the way. Shot 11% from 3. The rest of the team shot about 28, 29% from 3. Listen, man, I mean, the team was literally top heavy. It's kind of like playing in your township, right? You sign up to play sports. There's a couple all-stars on your team, and everybody else is just there because their parents signed them up to play. So when I look at this and I look at Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, no, I'm not going to hold this against them. I still think Ace is the pick. Paul George is doubling down on it. I'm doubling down on it. I think Ace Bailey is the best fit for the Sixers, and he has the long-term boom potential. So Ace still should be the pick at 3 right now if it was up to me. That's why I say when you're scouting these prospects, it's not apples to apples all the time. You really have to dive in and take everything into consideration. But based on what we're seeing, I mean, I can't be mad at Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper that they didn't make the tournament because they're playing with guys who really are just not that good. Lastly, we look at the Eastern Conference, and I'm thinking about the future, man. Sham said that this could be the craziest offseason in history, and I believe it because, listen, man, the Celtics are going to have to move some pieces. They're most likely not winning it next year with Tatum being out with the Achilles. You have right now the Indiana Pacers, who might be the leader of the conference next year, which is crazy to think. The Knicks are stuck. If they lose, it's not like they can upgrade, make any moves. They're going to be the same team. Milwaukee might trade Giannis. Detroit's still on the come up, right? But still trying to build on what they did this year. Orlando kind of fizzled out. Miami doesn't have Jimmy anymore. Cleveland's been the second round juggernauts, right? And they've been making the second round, looking like this was the year they were going to go all the way, or at least to the conference finals. They didn't even make it there. And let's just say that things start to align and fall in the right direction next year. I mean, this could be the perfect opportunity for the Sixers to climb back in and be a top 4, top 5 team if all things go right. The biggest question is always if they are healthy, right? If they are healthy, sure, they can come back and bounce back and have a really good year. But I think whatever teams have good off seasons and again, try to find that line and try to toe the line perfectly and upgrade their rosters without putting too much burden in the long term on their teams, I think will be most successful. And I think this is a pivotal offseason for the entire NBA. Give me your thoughts down below in the comments section. As always, appreciate everybody for tapping in. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. With that being said, I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.